If you enjoy seeing how different people approach the same genre, trope, or type of writing, you should look into anthologies. Anthologies are where a group of authors have all written a short story that is centered around the same theme. So you'll get to see each author's own unique twist on the topic of that anthology, which is what we're going to talk about today. This is how Fae uses theme and order to create a magical story collection. Fae, an anthology of fairy stories, is edited and curated by Rhonda Parrish, and it's different takes on the Fae. Fairies, hobgoblins, elves, that sort of a thing. But what's really unique about this collection is the order impacts the way the reader feels about the Fae afterwards. So by looking at this collection, you can learn how the order of a collection can impact a reader's experience, how different stories can be while still having the same high quality, and how different authors' writing styles can fit together. And if you hang on until the end of this video, I will share how you can get a free revision checklist, which will make sure your stories are ready for publication. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. Let's jump into using story order to make a statement. There have been all sorts of different versions of the Fae in modern media, but the trend has been towards humanizing them. Rhonda Parrish does something a little bit different in her Fae collection. By choosing to bookend her collection with Rosy Red Jacket by Christine Morgan and The Price by Carrie Castor, she is making a statement about the Fae. These two pieces end with a high price that the Fae have charged for their help or for interacting with humans. And this is harking back to the darker side of the Fae. Traditionally, Fae are not friends of the human. Fairies, elves, all of those creatures have a completely different moral and ethic structure than we do. So they often trick, enslave, and use humans. They're not good, fun little creatures that bring you presents on Christmas. Both Rosy Red Jacket and The Price show that people often don't understand the full cost of interacting with the Fae until it's too late. And I can't really say much more about these stories without giving away the ending completely, so instead I want to talk about what they mean for the overall collection. While these stories definitely fit in the collection, Rhonda Parrish chose to put them at the beginning and the end. That means these are the pieces that the reader is going to most remember and that are going to most affect the tone of the overall collection. So by choosing these as her bookend pieces, she is highlighting that darker side of the Fae. Not all of the stories have that same dark side in them. If instead she was curating a collection for children, she probably wouldn't have these stories at all, but she definitely wouldn't bookend the collection with something so dark. If this had been a collection for something like supernatural romance lovers who like reading romance stories about the Fae, it also wouldn't be appropriate to bookend it with such a dark, sort of bittersweet couple of stories. This works because of what Rhonda Parrish is saying with her collection about the topic of that anthology. If you find yourself curating a collection, whether it's all your stories or stories from other authors, don't just think about the theme. Think about the message you want to convey about that theme. Choose stories that are the closest to that message about the theme to bookend the collection with. This will help set that tone and deliver that message in the same way Rhonda Parrish has done about the Fae in her anthology. For example, if you're curating a collection of murder mysteries, starting and ending with a story where the villain gets away is going to create a very different tone and message about those murder mysteries than starting and ending with a story where the villain gets their comeuppance. Think about that when you're curating your collection. Next, I want to share how a strong theme ties different styles and formats together. A good anthology has a target reader just like a novel does. So when you're thinking about the theme of your collection, think about a theme that your ideal readers will be excited by. Fae is something that most fantasy readers are familiar with and excited by. So Rhonda Parrish didn't just use Fae as the theme, she also put it in the title of her collection to help capture those ideal readers' attention. You might want to do something similar for your collection. I recommend thinking about buzzwords in your genre. For example, murder for murder mysteries, love story for romance, fae for fantasy. What are words that your ideal readers immediately perk up at because they're thinking, this is the type of story I like to read? Try making one of those buzzwords your theme. What this also does, a strong theme, is it ties together all of the stories in your collection, even if they're different from each other structurally. One of the things I personally loved about the Fae was how each author's unique approach to the Fae wasn't just in the story, it was also in the format of the story. Some authors created lists that was almost like list poetry, some followed a more traditional short story format, some fell somewhere in between. I, as a reader and writer, love that sort of a thing, so I really appreciated how the theme tied together these different story formats and made the collection work despite the different authors' styles. If the collection had had a more broad theme, then these different styles might not have worked so well together. For example, if the collection was just fiction, well, that might be too broad for any one reader to want to pick up. Because it was more specified than that is why the authors were able to play a little bit more with their own unique style and structure. So if you have a collection with very different formats and they're just not working together, take a look at your theme. Maybe the theme just isn't strong enough to tie together all of those different formats. If you are going to have a more broad theme, think about your tone that you want to associate with that theme. That might help you tie in those stories better. Also, think about using a more traditional story structure or the same story structure to help create more of that consistency. For example, if you have a collection of historical fiction and that is the only theme, it's just historical fiction, not a time period or anything like that, it would be odd if most of your stories have an elegant prose style, except for one that is clipped and fast-paced like typical action stories are. So make sure your collection is fitting together both structurally and thematically, or that one element is strong enough that you can play with the other one. In Fae, an Anthology of Fairies, the stories do focus specifically on the Fae and the magic of them. So it's not just a story that happens to have a fairy in it. That is a central element to the story itself. Why this is so important is because some of these stories take place in the past. Some of them take place in our modern society, and some of them take place in a completely different world. Again, in order to tie together these different stories that have these different approaches, Fae needed a strong theme. So the theme was the Fae, but each author really went for that theme and really explored what the Fae mean to them and how their magic works. You might also need to remind authors or yourself, if all of the stories are from you, that the theme needs to be at the heart of each of the stories if you want to tie together different approaches like this. If you don't want such a strong theme, you might have to specify that the theme is Fae in modern times, or the theme is Fae in historical 1800s England. You might have to get a little bit more specific if you don't want to have that theme so front and center. What we're trying to do with this is to appeal to our ideal reader and make the overall collection have an arc and work as a whole, not just as individual stories. Next, I want to share an author and editor's thoughts on Fae and Anthology of Fairies. When I first read Rhonda Parrish's collection, I was very excited because the approach to the Fae many of these authors took is very similar to my approach to fairy tales in my collection When Magic Calls. I like playing with different structures like they did in the collection, and I kept that fairy tale theme very front and center and at the heart of the stories like these authors did with the Fae. What that told me is that there is a market for the type of story I like to write, and read, and that there are other people doing the same thing. So it gives me opportunities for collaborations, newsletter events, that sort of a thing. Also, more and more as an author, I find myself writing the types of stories I really want to read. I get frustrated when things are too predictable. So I try and slip in some unpredictable elements in my stories, and it was nice to see another collection that's doing something similar. So when you're looking at anthologies like Fae, look for authors who write similarly to you. They're not your competition, they're your allies. It could be an opportunity for you to reach out and create some sort of collaboration. Maybe you can put together a collection together. Maybe you can cross-promote each other. Maybe you can host some sort of author event together. Look for authors who share your same audience and writing style, and that'll help you find your readers. And when you're putting together your own anthology or collection of short stories, look at other anthologies and collections to see how they did it. Keep the pieces that you loved and ignore the stuff that you didn't like about the way they organized their collection. You might figure out a way to deliver a message like Rhonda Parrish did about the Fae. Use these other collections to inspire your own. That said, have you read an anthology recently that inspired you? Share it in the comments below. And for more videos on collections and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and author. To find out more about me, go to ignitedinkwriting.com. There you will find that revision checklist, which will help you know when your stories are ready for publication. It's also linked in the description below. And go to caitlinburvey.com if you want to check out my collection, When Magic Calls, to see how I arranged it and hopefully take away some things that can help you arrange your own collection. And now it's your turn to take a look at the Fae. Pay attention to how the order of the stories is making a statement about that theme, how the different story structures and author styles work together, and how you can use that collection to inspire your own to ignite your ink.